All right, hi guys. We are starting a new unit and we are going to be talking about decimals today. Now, I know that word may strike fear into some of your little fifth grade hearts, but really decimals are no different than what we already have been working with place value. Go ahead and turn to page 121 in your packet, and you'll see that there's a chart similar to the one that I have shown here that looks very much like place value charts that you guys are already familiar with. So they're using base 10 blocks to show that we have our 1, 10, 100, 1,000, right? And each time we go up a place value, we're going to be multiplying by 10. So let's start with our friend 1 over here. We have 1 times 10 is going to be our 10s group, right? So we know that when we have 10 ones, we move it up to the next place value or the tens place. We also know that when we have 10 tens, that would make a flat or a group of hundreds. And then we know that if we have 10 hundreds, we know that we get 1,000. So we're already pretty familiar with that concept. So that's really what number 1 is showing is I have it written here as the decimal point and everywhere over to the left of the decimal point. Now you'll notice that for part 2 it says, for part 1 it says look at the place value models and write in the missing factor in the equation to show how many tens, ones, and hundreds are, how tens, ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands are related. There we go. So what that is just saying is that you have 1 times 10 is 10, 10 times 10 is 100, 10 times 100 equals 1,000. Okay. Now for number 2, it says write the missing numbers in the equations below the place value models for decimals to show how many hundredths and tenths and ones, how hundredths, tenths, and ones are related. Now notice that as we move over to the right of ones, we are seeing some familiar words, tens, but we're adding th to it. 100, but we're adding th to it. So that th sound is not that you have a list all of a sudden when you're talking about math. It just means that you're talking about small portions of 1. So you can think about that like fractions. We're looking at a fractional piece of 1. So what I have here is we've magnified our friend 1 to show 1 up close. And we've divided our 1 into teeny tiny squares. And each of those squares is 1/100th of 1. If we had a whole row of them, we would have 10 hundredths or 1/10. So now we can go ahead and write 1 as 1.0, and that would be equal to 10 tenths. So 0.1 is like saying 10 times 0.01 or 1/10. And then next to that, we would have our thousandths. So, I'm sorry, for 1, we would have 1 is equal to 10 times 0.1 or 1/10. For tenths, we would have 10 hundredths, right? We'd have 10 of the even smaller pieces. So we would have 0.1, which is 10th, 1/10 is like 10 hundredths or 10 times 0.01. So each time, what's kind of important to remember with this is that each time we move one place value to the left, we're multiplying by 10. So tenths are 10 times hundredths. Ones are 10 times tenths. Tens are 10 times ones. Hundreds are 10 times tens, and thousands are 10 times ones. Now, if we move to the right, we're going to be dividing, right? Because multiplication and division are inverses. They kind of work as opposites. So just like 10 times 100 is 1,000, 1,000 divided by 10 is going to get us back to 100. 100 divided by 10 is going to give us 10. 10 divided by 10 is going to give us 1. 1 divided into 10 pieces is going to give us tenths. And those tenths divided into 10 pieces will give us hundredths. So we have our whole 1 is made up of 100 hundredths or 10 rows of 10 hundredths. So I know that sounds confusing, but really the only difference is that we're adding the th sound to the end of it. It's the same thing that we're doing here. We have 10 of our 10 rods makes 100. Well, now we're just working backwards and we're saying that one of our little hundredths, 10 of those would make tenths, and 10 of those tenths would make 1 whole. Number 3 says, look at your equations in problems 1 and 2. Explain how the value of each place value compares to the value of the place to its right. So the value of each place to the right, so if we're moving to the left, this one is 10 times the one to the right of it. So each time we're multiplying by 10 to increase our place value, right? Okay, on the next page, go ahead and turn to page 122. It says, fill in the blanks in the diagram to show how the values of the numbers change from row to row in the table. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of move my screen down. And here we have a chart that is similar to the one that you have written in your book. So they already have some of the numbers written in. They have 1. And then we see that our 1 has moved 1 place value over to the left for 10. And then it's moved over again 1 place value to the left for 100. 1,000 up at the top here, right? Now, if we're going the opposite way, still starting with 1, now I have 1 place value to the right, or 0.1. Then I would move it 1 more place value, 0.01. So down here, I'm going to have 0.001. Because each time my 1 is moving 1 place value either to the right or to the left. Now let's go ahead and say when I'm multiplying it to the right, when I'm going up my graph, up my ladder, I'm multiplying it by 10 each time, right? So 1 times 10 is 10. 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. So each of these is going to be multiplying by 10. Now, again, we can also go the other direction. We can go down our ladder by dividing by 10, right? So 1,000 divided by 10 is going to get us back to 100. 100 divided by 10 gets us to 10. 10 divided by 10 gets us to 1. Then if I have 1 and I divide it into 10 pieces, that's what gives me my tenths. So 1 divided by 10 is tenths, or 1/10. And tenths divided into 10 pieces would give me hundredths. If I divide my hundredths into teeny tiny pieces, then I would get my thousandths. So I've written a little note down at the bottom that says you can think of division as fractions as well, remember? So 10 is 1 out of 10, or 1/10 of 100, or 10 over 100. 0.1, or 1/10, is 1 out of 10, or 1/10 of 1. Each time you go down a place value on our ladder, it is 1/10 of the number above. So 1/10 of 1 is 1/10. 1/10 of 1/10 is 100th. 1/10 of 10 is 1. 1/10 of 100 is 10. So basically, division and fractions can work the same way. We can go ahead and write it as a fraction. 1 out of 10 is going to give us our 10. Each time you go up a place value, it's 10 times the place value of the place below it. So go ahead and fill in the chart as we did here for number 4. Number 5 says, what happens to the position and value of the digit 1 when you multiply by 10? So each time this 1 when you multiply by 10, it moves 1 place value to the left from where it was. Number 6 says, what happens to the position and value of the digit when you divide by 10? When you divide by 10, we're going the opposite way. We're going to move 1 row down, or our 1 shifts 1 place value to the right. Number 7, what do you think is the value of the digit 1 and the number you wrote in the last row of the table? So they're talking about this one here, 0.001. So we already named that as 1,000, or you could think of that as 1 over 1,000, right? So if we're thinking about it as fractional pieces, we have 1/1000th would be our final example there. And number 8 says dividing a number by 10 is the same as finding 1/10 of the number. Use the phrase 1/10 of or the phrase 10 times to complete each statement about 1,000th. So 1,000th is blank of 100. So 1,000th would be, we divided by 10 from 100th to get to 1,000th. 1,000th is 1/10 of 100. We divided it by 10 once. Now the second one said 1/100th, which is what we have here, is blank 1/1000. So if we're moving up, we're going to say 100th is 10 times 1,000 because we multiplied 1/1000 by 10 to get to 1/100. All right, I know that can seem kind of confusing right now. Go ahead and skip on over to page 124. And I'd like for you to go ahead and do numbers 3 and 4 on your own. So pause the video and then come on back and we will review your answers for number 3 and 4 on page 124. All right. Now that you've completed those problems, let's go ahead and look at them. So number 3 says write the missing number in each sentence below the base 10 model to show how many ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands are related. So first we have thousands, and then in hundreds, we have 100 is 1/10 of blank. Well, we can remember fractions, we can think of it as like division. So what is 1/10? 100 is 1/10. That would be like we divided it by 10 of the number that's greater, right? So we would have, what is the number that if you multiplied by 10, 100 by 10, what will we get? Well, we know that 100 times 10 is going to be 1,000. So 100 is 1/10 or divided by 10 of 1,000. All right. Tens, we're going to do the same thing. 10 is blank of, oops, 10 is 1/10 of what? Well, again, we've gone one more place value over, so 10 is 1/10 of 100. And then the last one says 1 is 1/10 of, hopefully you're starting to see the trend here. 1 is 1 out of 10 of 10, right? We would divide 10 by 10 to get 1. Now for number 4, it says write the missing number in each sentence below the decimal grid models to show how hundredths, tenths, and ones are related. All right, so same principle, just a different place value. So we have 1.0 or 1 as our first value. In the next box, it says 0.1 is 1/10 of, so it's 1/10 of the value that comes to the left, so it would be 1/10 of 1.0. Now for hundredths, we have 0.01 or 1/100th is 1/10 of, so it's 100th of 1, but it's 1/10 of 0.1 or 1/10. All right, we're going to go ahead and skip number 5 and move on to the next page. So we're now on page 125. It says each decimal grid in models A, B, and C represents one whole. Shade each model to show the decimal number below the model. So A says 3.0. So that's by showing that we have 3 ones or 3. So remember, one whole decimal grid there we go. One decimal grid represents 0.1, right? So that would be if I shaded this whole thing in. But they're saying that I have, oops, no, sorry, 1.0. Sorry. 1.0 would be one whole grid, right? So I would shade in my whole grid to show 1.0 or 1. Now, if I have 3.0, we're thinking of that as 3. So I would have 3 of my grids, right? I would have 3 whole grids, and they would all be shaded in. Okay? So even if we add 0.0 to any number, it's still going to have the same value as 1. So 3.0 is going to be like 3, 1. 10.0 is going to be like 10, 1. Okay? Now let's go ahead and move on to Model B. Model B says now we have 0.3. I still have my grid, so we have 3/10. So my grid is broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 equal parts, equalish parts. And they have it gridded further, but really we're saying we have 3/10. So I'm going to have 3/10 of my 1, which remember is like saying I have 1 column, right? So that would be like if I had 1/10, but now I need 3 of them. So I'm going to shade in 2/10 and 3/10. Okay, so I've shaded in 3 to show 3/10. Now, when I get to my 100, now I've divided this further. Now remember, I'm still dealing with one whole, right? It's just that I've cut it up into more pieces, more fractions. So now if I have 0.03, I have my 3 in my hundredths place, so I have 300. Each of these little pieces counts as 100 because it takes 100 of them to make 1, just like it needs 10 to make 1. So now I have 300. I'm going to go ahead and shade in 3 of my little hundredth squares. You can shade in any 3 that you want. All right, number 2 says complete the different equations that show the relationships between the numbers shown in models A, B, and C above. So what they have is blank times 10 equals blank. Well, let's go ahead and start from our smallest point. We have 300 times 10 would get us 3/10 because our decimal place has moved 1 place value over. All right, now I'm going to say the same thing. Blank times 10 equals blank. I'm going to use my 3/10. 3/10 times 10 is 3, 1. Now they have blank divided by 10 equals blank. So I'm just going to take this last one and flip it around and say, now instead of multiplying by 10, I'm going to say 3 divided by 10 is 3/10. And 3/10 divided by 10 is going to equal, if we multiply 3/10 times 10 to get, if we multiply 300 times 10 to get 3/10, we're going to divide 3/10 by 10 to get 300. Okay, number 3 says finding 1/10 of a number is the same as multiplying the number by 0.1. Complete each sentence and then write the sentence as a multiplication equation. So they have for A, 0.03 or 300 is 1/10. Remember, we're dividing of, well, what did we multiply 3/10 by to get? We got 3/10. So 300 is 1/10 of 3/10. An equation that you could write would be 0.03 equals 1 times, I'm sorry, 1/10 of 3/10. So we're letting our multiplication symbol stand in the place of, and our equal sign stand in the place of is. So let's try it again. Now it says blank is 1/10 of 3 ones. So what would 1/10 of 3 ones be? It would be 3/10. So now if we convert our sentence to an equation, I would say 3/10 equal to 1/10 times 1/10 of 3. Okay, on page 126. So I know this is a lot of information. If you don't fully understand it at this point, that's okay, because remember, we're going to be going over our practice pages together on Thursday. So if you don't fully understand decimals, don't freak out, okay? We will get there. Really, the basic thing to realize is that I think the most confusing part of decimals is just the terminology. So 3/100, 3/10, and just 3, right? Oops. Oh yeah, no, I read that corrected. So, but really the same place value model holds that we have been working with all along. We multiply by 10 to increase to the next place value. We divide by 10 to decrease to the place value below it. So it's the same thing working with decimals. We're just taking 1 and we're dividing it first into tenths, then into hundredths, and then into thousandths. And then if we wanted to get really small, we would go into 10,000ths, right? Because we're following the same model that we would as we were increasing. We're just making it into smaller and smaller bits. All right, so on page 126, it says use a number line to show how decimal place values are related. So B says place a point on, so first of all, we're going to go ahead and use the number line instead of using our grids. So first they've shown us that we have a number line with 0 and 1, right? So that's showing us if we were to continue our number line, our next number would be 2, 3, 4. So we're counting by whole numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But this is just showing us that we have 0 and 1 would be our next number. Now we have another number line. It also goes from 0 to 1. But in this one, we've divided it into 10 equal parts, right? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that would be like saying I have 5/10, right? So remember back to fractions. Here I would have 10/10. 5/10 would be halfway. Then I would have 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and 10/10. But if we're going to write it as a decimal, we're going to fill it in with 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and then we have 10/10, so we could also write it like that. Now, if we want to get even smaller, which of course we do on the next number line, we're still talking about our space between 0 and 1, but this time, instead of dividing it into tenths, we're going to divide it into hundredths. Now, I'm not actually going to take the time to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and line it up and say that I have 10/10, or 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and 10/10. But then between each of these, I also have increments of 10, right? So my first one is, this is 100th. Then I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hundredths, which we would write like this. So I have, that's kind of hard to read. Here's 1/10. It lines up in the same place. So to show that I'm dealing with hundredths, I'm going to add one more zero to it. So now my line for 200ths, I would have 0.2 hundredths, 0.3 hundredths. I'm going to switch over up here, 0.4 hundredths, 0.5 hundredths, 0.6 hundredths. I'm going to stagger so that I can squeeze them all in. 0.7 hundredths, 0.8 hundredths, 0.9 hundredths. And then if I had 10/10, here I'm going to have 100 hundredths, right? So we're thinking of it as 10 hundredths, 20 hundredths, 30 hundredths, 40 hundredths, 50 hundredths, 60 hundredths, 70 hundredths, 80 hundredths, 90 hundredths, and 100 hundredths, because between each of these we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hundredths. Okay? So that's actually where we're going to go ahead and leave off for right now. So don't worry about completing the rest of those pages. We're going to work through pages 127 and 128 together. If you would like some more practice with decimals, 129 and 130, you can go ahead and complete as extra practice. They're not required, but if you found this lesson a little bit confusing, you might want to go back and review those after we go over the practice pages together to just make sure that we're kind of solidifying some of those things that we just learned. All right, I will see you guys then on Thursday for our practice practice pages session, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for more fun. All right, bye.